Hello, teachers. This is Apollos from Teaching with Power, and my goal is to make you a more powerful gospel teacher. Our insight today comes from the Easter lesson from the Come Follow Me manual for April 15th through the 21st. And in this video, I give you insight number 2, focusing on the greatest miracle Jesus Christ ever performed, the resurrection. The raising of Lazarus from the dead was the greatest miracle Christ had performed at that point. It's one thing to raise another person from the dead, but it's completely another to raise yourself from the dead. So, here we go. When Jesus dies, 2 things happen around him. And if you're not thinking about it, you might miss the symbolism of these 2 events. Send your students to Matthew chapter 27, verses 50 through 52, and ask, what 2 things happened immediately after Jesus died? And as they look through those verses, they should answer that 1, the veil of the temple was rent in twain, and there was an earthquake that rent the earth. Now you can ask them, what 2 things did Jesus Christ's atonement and resurrection overcome? And the answer is physical death and spiritual death. Then you say, each of the 2 events is a symbol of Christ's victory over these 2 deaths. Ask next, which of the 2 events do you think represents Christ's victory over physical death? And the answer they should come up with is the earthquake. The earth can no longer hold back the resurrection of those that have already died. In fact, in the next verse, that is exactly what we have happening. The scriptures say, and the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose. It's as if the earth itself was testifying that even it could not hold back the power of the resurrection. Then you're going to ask, then which of the 2 would symbolize the victory over spiritual death? And the obvious answer, the tearing of the temple veil. You then could ask them, how is the tearing of the temple veil a good symbol for victory over spiritual death? Let them think about that for a little bit and comment about it. But whether it comes from them or you, the point could be made that the veil is the physical symbol of the actual spiritual veil that separates us from God's presence. And that is the definition of spiritual death. But now that the resurrection has taken place, nothing could separate us from our Heavenly Father. All men and women could now have the opportunity to return to God as resurrected sons and daughters. Symbolism, so fun, I love it. Now, another insight you could give them comes from a very tender moment in John chapter 20 when Mary Magdalene comes to the tomb. And there she is weeping when she discovers that Christ's body is missing. And in verse 14, it says that she turned herself back and saw Jesus standing and knew not that it was Jesus. Now, that's probably because her eyes are filled with tears. But then Jesus asks her, woman, why weepest thou? She thinks he's the gardener and says, Sir, if thou have borne him hence, tell me where thou hast laid him, and I will take him away. Jesus then says to her, Mary. And I wish I could get the tone of that right. I never think I do. It must have been said with such tenderness and love and familiarity that she immediately recognizes that it's him. And what a moment that would have been for her to turn around and see Jesus Christ alive. Now, at this point, I might stop and ask my students, remember, Mary is not the only person who ever gets to have the chance to experience something like this. One day, you too will get to see those you have lost. One day, you're going to turn around, and there they will be. And you will cry and hug and rejoice at the truth and the power of the resurrection. Because of his resurrection, all of us will be resurrected, and all the pain and loss and grief we have suffered will be gone. Then ask them, what about the resurrection do you look forward to most? I imagine you'll have some very sincere thoughts and feelings expressed at that question. Now, if nobody's willing to share at first, you might want to get the ball rolling by sharing your own faith in the resurrection. Now, maybe a quick bonus thought here. In verse 17, Jesus says to Mary, touch me not. And I think we always assume that means that Mary was not allowed to touch Jesus at that moment. Like we assume that touching Jesus' resurrected body would be harmful or unworthy, or there's something so powerful she couldn't handle it. I'm not sure if that's the case. It doesn't seem to make sense to me because Jesus is always asking people to touch him and the wounds in his hands and in his side and in his feet. And that's why I think it's significant that the word touch is changed in the Joseph Smith translation. If you look at the footnote, Joseph, through inspiration, changes the word to hold me not. And there's a reason why he changes it, which suggests to me that Jesus is only saying that he can't stay long because he still needs to report to Heavenly Father that he is risen. Like saying, Mary, don't hold me back. I need to go and report to my Father. So in my mind, I do picture them embracing. I imagine they did. I don't know how you couldn't at the joy of seeing somebody alive that you thought was dead. 1, to show your love, but 2, to really confirm that this thing that is almost too good to be true really is true. So I think they embraced that Jesus gave her that special moment, and then gently reminded her that he had something very important to do. And that's beautiful to me. One might ask why Mary Magdalene was the first person to see the resurrected Lord. Why not Peter? Why not the other apostles? Why not his mother? Why this particular woman? And I don't claim to know the definitive answer to that question, but I like to think that it was a spontaneous moment, that it was something unplanned, that Jesus had just been resurrected and he had the most important report to make in history, to go to his Father and tell him that he had completed the atonement, that he had overcome death and sin for all mankind. But a woman was crying, and he just couldn't help but comfort her and give her that moment of reassurance and confirmation of her faith. That was Jesus' nature. It seems to fit with the kind of individual Jesus Christ is. Well, I hope that's helpful to you as you teach this Easter season. If you found this video helpful in any way, I ask you to hit the like and the subscribe buttons. Also, if you have any additional insights or personal thoughts on the resurrection, or just any feedback for me, then go ahead and leave them in the comments below. All right, thank you. Go out and teach with power.